I was thinking what content to create next when I stumbled upon this captivating image. Its rustic beauty and timeless appeal instantly captured my attention. I tried to recreate a similar look, and I ended up with this result. In this video, I will show you the creation process and some tips I learned creating this realistic medieval house in Blender. To do this, we'll utilize the fspy software and the fspy to Blender add-on. Let's now dive into the fspy program. Project files and fspy website links are in the description below. We're going to use this software to match the perspective of an image to a camera setting. Camera matching is an important step to help us find the appropriate camera focal length, which makes modeling easier. As you can see in the vanishing point axis option, the red line represents the x-axis, which is the horizontal axis, and the green line represents the y-axis, which is the Blender's forward and backward axis. Simply align those axes on the image. The best locations to choose are those having at different depths. You may now use this cursor to check if the perspective of the picture is correctly aligned. I'll move the cursor to this location, which will serve as the origin point when we move this to Blender. Change x-axis into -x so that the z-axis will point upward. Just save the file, then open it in Blender. Before we start, be sure you have activated the fspy add-on. You may get it from the fspy website and install it on Blender. Once done, select File, Import, fspy, then it will bring up the fspy camera into the scene with correct focal length camera settings. I'm gonna split the screen. The left window will be my reference, and the right window will be the working area. Let's now add a cube. On Edit mode, align it to the image to create the basic shape of the building by simply doing some extrusions. On Edit mode, add a plane for the roof. Keep extruding the plane object until it aligns to the roof image. You can use the Move tool and Rotate tool to manipulate the object. Now that the building's basic outline is already created, let's apply a new material. Go to the Shading workspace, click New, add Image Texture, connect to Principled BSDF, and then let's select our image. As you can see, the texture is distorted. To fix it, I'll just add a few modifiers. Add a Subdivision Surface modifier, set to Simple, and then change the viewport and render to 5. Add UV Project modifier. Let's set this to UV Map. Then the object, set it to fspy camera. Now it's looking nice, but the texture is still a little off the mesh. I'm gonna fix it by simply putting the dimensions of the image to the aspect ratio of UV Project modifier. This image resolution reads 3872 by 2576. I'll just input it here. As you can see, the picture now properly aligns with the mesh. Cool. Once done, we can now work on the details of the image. Apply the UV Project modifier so that we can work on the UV mapping texture without issues. Before we start, make sure correct UV is activated to avoid texture distortion issues. Once activated, on Edit mode, start adding loop cuts by pressing Ctrl or on the keyboard. Simple move the loop cuts by pressing G twice. Place it on the areas with high contrast like doors, windows, and frames. You can use the knife tool if Ctrl R is not available. Simply press K and drag it to the areas where you want to add some edge loops. If you encounter a knife tool issue like the line disappearing when making 2 points, you simply press C on the keyboard to constrain direction. You can also adjust the individual edge loops to properly align the edges. This process can take some time, so be patient, because the more time we spend adding loop cuts, the better quality because we can add more details to the object we're working on. Once done adding loop cuts, on Edit mode, let's add a cylinder. Then align it to the house pillars. Simply move and extrude the mesh until it fits with the reference image. Once done, press U, Project from View. Then adjust the edge loops to fix the textures. Place it over the reference image to match the textures. Still on Edit mode, select the cylinder by pressing L, then press P, then separate the object by selection. This will enable us to move the object without texture issues. But as you can see here, we're having trouble moving this object. It's because the origin point is detached from the object itself. To fix that, select the object, set origin, then origin to geometry. Let's now select these faces here. Press X, then delete faces. Let's put some flooring here by filling the gaps. To do that, select the edges here, then press F on the keyboard. Move and adjust the pillar's height. Add some loop cuts to create some curves. Next, add another cylinder and just repeat the process on the others. Add some loop cuts on the woods here. Then delete some faces. So that we can place this pillar here. Add another cylinder and repeat the process. Delete this face. Then extrude these woods here to create some details. Continue adding loop cuts on these area below. Extrude them to add details. To add realism, create some variation by rotating the objects on different angle. Now, open a new window below, go to Shader Editor, UV Editor here on the left side, then select our image. You can adjust individual edges or points to match the loop cuts on the reference image. Delete faces here. Extrude to extend the pillar here. Add some details of this rag here by extruding. Delete these faces here to match on our reference image. Duplicate the pillar here and place it below this rag. Delete again to expose the pillar. Extrude this part below the house. Cube projection. Place the edge loops over the reference image to match the textures. On Edit mode, select this facade by pressing C, Project from View, then align it to the reference to match the texture. Add a cylinder to create another pillar on this area. On Edit mode, Project from View, then place the edge loops over the reference image to match the textures. Add another cylinder and repeat the process on the other parts of the house. Delete these faces here. Add a cylinder to create this concrete pillar. Project from View, then place the edge loops over the reference image to match the textures. Duplicate the mesh. Separate by selection, set origin to geometry. Then align it to the objects on the image. On Edit mode, Project from View, then place the edge loops over the reference image to match the textures. Delete another faces. Duplicate this pipe. Add loop cuts, extrude to add depths and details. I'm gonna delete these faces. Add loop cuts. Continue adding pillars, delete faces. Add a plane here on the roof, reshape it like a triangle. On Edit mode, Project from View, then place the edge loops over the reference image to match the textures. Add another pillar on this corner, Project from View, then place the edge loops over the reference image to match the textures. Now, let's add a cube for the stairs. Add an array modifier. Play with the settings to create a stair going up the house. Select these sides. Project from View, then place the edge loops over the reference image to create some details. Extend the pillar until it reaches the roof. Select the roof, cube projection, then place the edge loops over the reference image to create some details. Next, gonna add images planes. Then select the thatch textures. Download link is on the description. Scale it up a bit. On Edit mode, create a loop cut. Then delete faces to isolate the thatch. On Edit mode, subdivide the thatch 3 times. Then set origin to geometry. Next, align the thatch on the roof. Duplicate it to create an array of thatch. Select all, then group them by pressing Ctrl-J. Duplicate the thatch group to cover the entire roof. Isolate this single thatch, then duplicate again to cover the rest of the uncovered part of the roof. Next, let's also fill the other side. Duplicate the thatch group, flip it by pressing Ctrl-M, drag it on the other side. Simply repeat the process until it covers the entire roof. The thatch angle should match the angle of the roof base to avoid the roof base sticking out of the thatch. Next, let's put a wood stick at the center, duplicate one pillar, scale it up, then bring it to the center of the roof. Press Tab to go into Edit mode, press L to select all, then place the edge loops over the reference image to match the textures. Duplicate the thatch, then place it here on the roof canopy. Isolate a single thatch, duplicate until it covers the entire canopy. Now, go into Render mode. You can see that there are some black areas on the roof. This means that there are some overlapping of meshes going on. To fix this, simply reposition the thatch until the black area is removed. Delete this, faces on the ground. Copy the base model material and paste the material to the stairs. Select the stairs, go to Edit mode, then place the edge loops over the reference image to match the textures. Now, as you can see, the roof looks dull and flat. Let's add some thickness. To do that, on Edit mode, select some parts of the thatch, press O to enable proportional editing, then press G to distort the mesh on your desired look. Repeat the process on different parts of the roof. This will create roof thickness and some imperfections to add realism to the scene. Let's add a cube here. This will be the stair railing. Resize it, position it on the side. Copy the stair material, then paste it to the railing. On Edit mode, press U. Cube projection, then place the edge loops over the reference image to create your desired textures on the railing. Duplicate the pillar, place it below the railing. Duplicate the stair railing, then position it on the left side of the stairs. Next, continue adding imperfection to the roof by distorting the thatch. Continue this process until you achieve your desired look. Now, let's refine the texture of this with texture on the house facade. Let's make it smaller by adjusting the edge loops on the UV map. Let's get rid of these plants sticking on the textures. Select these faces where there are plants. Rotate the edge loops. Change the rotation into Y-axis. Then change the value into 0. Align it into the woods. Now, let's add some windows. Duplicate the window face. Extrude. Separate by selection. Set origin to geometry. Move it right here. Reposition the origin point. Then using the rotation tool, rotate the window like this. Now, let's fix this window texture by adjusting the edge loops on your desired texture. Next, let's add some edge loops here. Select faces, then extrude them inside. As you can see, there is some mesh issue here. We can't delete this extra mesh. To fix this, select the face with extra mesh, go to Face, Triangulate Faces. This will remove the extra mesh and create some triangles on the mesh. Simply repeat the process on the other mesh with the same issues. We can also merge the vertices to avoid texture issues. Once done, select these faces then extrude. Now, we have another issue here. As you can see, smooth shading doesn't work with this mesh. To fix that, go to Modifier Property, then simply disable the Subsurf modifier, then Shade Smooth should work perfectly. Simply repeat the process on the other mesh with the same issues. On this part, I'll just repeat the process of adding windows. Just be patient, pay attention to every details to achieve better realism. Now, select these faces here. Let's get rid of sticking thatch. Fix the textures by simply repositioning the edge loops. Simply repeat the process on the other mesh with the same issues. Add edge loops. Then extrude. This is to create more depth and details, which is very important to achieve realistic 3D render. Continue fixing textures by repositioning the edge loops on the UV map. If you want more of this kind of content, please leave a like and share this video. And if you're new here, kindly subscribe now so that you will get updated on my next videos. Alright, continue extruding, adding, and adjusting the edge loops until you achieve the look that you want. Next, let's now apply some materials to our model. Let us add a bump in order to enhance the realism of the 3D model. Open Shader Editor, select the base model, go to Material Properties, duplicate the house material, then hit this icon to create an independent copy of the same material. Gonna rename this into Bump. Duplicate our image texture node, add Color Ramp. Connect to Color Ramp, then to Roughness. Select this face, then Assign. As you can see, the bump texture is already applied. Add a bump node, connect to bump height, then normal to normal. You can adjust the color ramp slider to play with the roughness of the object. Disconnect color ramp to roughness if you don't want the texture to look like this. Now, just play with the bump strength to change the bump intensity. Add a mix color, connect the image textures, then mix color to base color, then to bump height. Color ramp to roughness. Play with the color ramp slider. Change mix to multiply. Now, change the black color to gray to reduce some texture wetness. Next, we're gonna add another bump texture for the facade. I want it to be a unique copy from the first bump texture. Duplicate the bump material, then hit this icon to create an independent copy of the same material. Select the facade, then hit Assign. Now, add RGB curves here to add some saturation on the wood color. Next, select the rest of building facade. Then assign the bump material. I'll just assign the bump textures on other parts of the image. I'll create another unique copy of bump texture for the wall texture here, and I'll just repeat the process. Once done, simply apply the texture on the parts which you want to have a bump texture. Next, we're gonna add a wood texture to this window. Duplicate the second bump texture. Rename it into wood. This will be our wood material for the window. But since the wood texture that we're gonna apply is a separate texture, we're gonna use two UV maps. Let's add UV map, then connect them to each image texture. Go to Object Data Properties, UV Maps, add UV Map, rename it into Wood. Go to First UV Map node, select the first texture which is our house texture, then for the second UV Map node, select Wood, which will be our wood texture. Go to Second Image Texture and replace the image with the wood texture. This texture is downloadable on the description. As you can see, selecting the wood UV map only affects the wood texture as we manipulate the wood texture. Now, let's apply the wood texture on this window. Then add a second UV map slot for the wood texture. Now, when the wood UV map is selected, only the wood texture is being affected when we manipulate the wood texture. Now, when we want to manipulate the house texture without affecting the wood texture, simply select the first UV map, then adjust the edge loop of the house texture. Repeat the process on the other windows. Alright, once done, continue applying the materials on the parts of the house which has no textures. To do that, on Edit mode, select the parts of the mesh which you want to have texture, select the material of choice, then hit Assign. As for the application of wood texture of the window, just repeat the process of multiple UV map texturing that we did earlier. Next, let's add a concrete texture. To do that, go to Material Properties, duplicate the second bump material, then hit this icon to create an independent copy of the same material, then rename this into Concrete. Go to the second image texture and replace the image with the concrete texture. This texture is downloadable on the description. On Edit mode, select Face, go to the concrete material, then hit Assign. Alright, perfect. Once done, simply apply the texture on the parts which you want to have a concrete texture. Next, to refine the render, simply repeat all the processes that we have discussed earlier until you achieve the look of your desired render. Thank you so much guys for joining me this Blender tutorial. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this content, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated on future uploads. See you in the next video.